1944. Occupied France. A 6-year-old boy pedaled his bicycle through the streets of Herson, a small town in northern France near the Belgian border. In the basket at the front of his bike were vegetables and bread. At least, that's what the German soldiers saw when they stopped him. Hidden beneath the food were messages, intelligence reports, coded notes, communications between members of the French resistance. The boy would smile politely, answer questions in a soft, innocent child's voice, and then ride on. His name was Marcel Pinte. He was 6 years old, and he was a courier for the French resistance. While most children his age were learning to read or playing in the streets, Marcel was helping his father fight the Nazi occupation of France. He carried messages that saved lives, warned of danger, and supported Allied operations. He did it with a calm courage that many adults struggled to summon. In 1944, Marcel's war ended tragically, but his story remains one of the most extraordinary examples of resistance during World War II, proof that heroism has no age limit. If you want to know how a first grader became one of the youngest resistance couriers in history, stay with me. To understand Marcel's story, you first need to understand life in occupied France. In June 1940, Nazi Germany invaded France and defeated it in just 6 weeks. The French government surrendered. Northern France fell under direct German military occupation, while the south became the collaborationist Vichy regime. For ordinary French citizens, occupation meant fear, hunger, and constant surveillance. German soldiers patrolled the streets. The Gestapo arrested anyone suspected of opposing the regime. Informers betrayed neighbors. Speaking out could lead to prison or execution. But not everyone accepted defeat. Across France, underground resistance networks formed. They sabotaged German infrastructure, gathered intelligence for the Allies, helped downed pilots escape, and prepared for the day France would be liberated. Resistance was deadly work. If caught, members faced torture and death. The Nazis publicly executed resistance fighters to intimidate the population. Communication was especially dangerous. Mail was monitored. Phones were tapped. Meetings were watched. So the resistance relied on couriers, people who physically carried messages from one contact to another. Adult couriers were under constant suspicion. German forces watched travelers closely. But children were different. A child running errands attracted little attention. Soldiers might question an adult, but often waved a child through without a search. That is where Marcel's story begins. Marcel Pinte was born in Herson. His father, Eugene Pinte, worked on the railways. When the Germans occupied France, Eugene made a fateful decision. He joined the resistance. His job gave him access to valuable intelligence. He could observe troop movements, military cargo, supply shipments, and transport schedules. Information like that was vital to the Allies. But gathering intelligence was only half the battle. It had to be delivered, quietly, safely, without attracting attention. Railway workers were closely monitored. Any mistake could mean arrest or execution. As Marcel grew old enough to understand what his father was doing, Eugene made a controversial choice. He involved his son. It was not a decision made lightly. Eugene knew the risks. But he also knew something else. Marcel could move through occupied territory in ways adults could not. A 6-year-old boy on a bicycle looked harmless. At just 6 years old, Marcel Pinte became a resistance courier. His job was simple, but vital. He carried messages. Notes written in code or on thin paper that could be destroyed instantly. Marcel hid them in his clothes, under groceries in his basket, sometimes even in his shoes. He rode his bicycle through occupied streets to deliver them, to shops, private homes, farms outside town. German soldiers were everywhere. Checkpoints, patrols, random searches. Adults were questioned constantly. But a child on a bicycle looked like nothing more than a boy helping his family. Marcel learned to act natural. When soldiers stopped him, and sometimes they did, he answered calmly. Where was he going? To his grandmother's. To buy bread. To deliver vegetables. The stories were simple. Innocent. Believable. The soldiers glanced into his basket, saw food, and waved him on. One resistance member later recalled, Marcel was fearless. He rode past German soldiers without hesitation. When they questioned him, he smiled and answered calmly. Then he delivered the message and went home like nothing had happened. For months, Marcel carried intelligence, warnings of Gestapo raids, troop movements, plans for sabotage. Every delivery helped the resistance survive. The work was not only dangerous, it was psychologically demanding. Marcel had to keep secrets. He couldn't tell friends. He couldn't brag. He lived two lives, an ordinary child in public, a resistance courier in secret. He lived with fear. Fear of capture. Fear for his father. Fear of what would happen if the truth was discovered. But he kept going. Because his father needed him. Because France needed him. Because even a child could understand that courage sometimes means acting despite fear. February 21, 1944. Marcel's work came to a sudden and tragic end. The exact circumstances remain unclear. What is known is that he was caught in the violence of combat operations in the region. By early 1944, Allied air raids over occupied France had intensified. The Normandy invasion was being prepared. Resistance activity increased. That day, Allied aircraft attacked German positions near Herson. Anti-aircraft fire filled the sky. Marcel was caught in the chaos. Some accounts say he was carrying a message. Others say he was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time. What is certain is this: 6-year-old Marcel Pinte was killed. His death devastated his family and the resistance network. Eugene continued his work, but the guilt never left him. He had made the choice to involve his child. That choice had consequences. Yet Marcel's work had mattered. The messages he carried saved lives. His courage inspired others. After the war, France faced difficult questions. How do you honor resistance heroes while acknowledging the tragedy of children in war? Marcel's story was debated. Some celebrated his bravery. Others questioned whether a 6-year-old should ever have been placed in such danger. In the end, France recognized his sacrifice. Marcel Pinte was honored as one of the youngest resistance heroes in history. A memorial was erected in his hometown. His story is taught not as simple heroism, but as a reminder of war's moral complexity. Marcel was both a hero and a victim, courageous and tragically young. His life asks a question with no easy answer. Should children ever be involved in resistance, even in desperate times? What we know is this: Marcel showed extraordinary bravery. He served without complaint. He faced danger repeatedly. And he paid the ultimate price. A 6-year-old boy on a bicycle helped fight tyranny. And his courage deserves to be remembered.